Okay,
we'll get started. Good morning, everybody. My name's Clayton Hyam. I'm the presiding member for this morning's Metro Outer Development Assessment Panel meeting. And today we have Mr. Jean Coltaz as the deputy presiding member, Ima Premji as the specialist member, Councillors Rose and Penny online. I declare the meeting open at 9:30 and acknowledge that we are hosting this meeting on traditional land of the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation. We acknowledge the Aboriginal people as the traditional custodians of Western Australia, pay respects to elders past and present, and the ongoing connection between people, land, and community. This meeting is being run in accordance with the standing orders under the Planning and Development Assessment Panels Regulations 2011. This meeting is also being recorded and live streamed on that website in accordance with the with Regulation 42A of the Planning and Development Regulations. Members are reminded to announce their name and title prior to speaking. All members may refer from time to time to technical devices throughout the meeting to assist them in considering the information before them. Those preliminaries out of the way, we'll move to part B of the agenda. That's the City of Kwinana, and I'll seek declarations of due consideration. Can all members confirm that you have duly considered all the documentation before you for part B? Thank you. Thank you. Just also noting that it was an R13 direction response that was published on the 23rd of October 2024 for item 3.1. Another one was published on the same day for item 3.2, being an alternate recommendation. And note, an addendum to RAR was published on the 18th of October for item 3.2, being the applicant's report. Are there any disclosures of interest? They have no recorded. Are there any? No. All right, thank you very much. Okay, we have item 3.1, which is the Lot 18 Mason Road, Kwinana Beach, for the BP Kwinana Renewable Fuels Biorefinery. Presenter in Taryn Prescott and Brett Hamill. So if you would like to, let's remind you also that there is a 3-minute limitation on presentation, so I'll let you know, get pretty close to 3 minutes.
thank you very much, presiding member and panel. So I'm Taryn Prescott, External Affairs for BP, based at the Kwinana Energy Hub. Hamill, who's representing the project and the application under which is being considered today. I'd like to also echo my respects for the traditional owners on the land in which we're meeting today, and also in which this proposal was being developed. So I wanted to just introduce what the Kwinana Energy Hub. There's some conversation in the application around the site itself, and just to share with the panel some of the history and the direction that BP is going towards for what was a former oil refinery site. So BP has operated at Lot 18 Mason Road for almost 70 years. It was established in 1955, and for about 65 years operated as WA's and Australia's largest oil refinery and WA's only oil refinery, importing crude and producing fuel products. In 2021, that operation ceased, and since then BP has been busily developing what it sees as a Kwinana Energy Hub vision, which is a site where our current operations, which is the import and supply of fuels. So we are safely operating an import terminal. I'll show you an image soon which shows the extent of which that infrastructure is taking up the site. Would be integrated with two ambitious renewable fuels projects. The one just being discussed today being the biorefinery, and a second project which will be subject to further applications, which is relating to the production of renewable hydrogen. Our site hosts currently around 500 personnel, That is a reduction on what was our steady state operational numbers. The majority of those personnel are involved with either the terminal operations, which is a sort of steady state operation, but also the transition of the site itself, which involves demolition activities and the delivery of a number of projects to optimise, as well as, of course, the early development of this project, including engineering resources. So that's the complexity of some of the conversations we've been having around the integrated nature of the site. We're preparing the site. We've completed about 90% or over 90% of the demolition, and we've proudly recycled the majority of that, particularly the metal and the concrete. And we've been a long-term contributor to the economy and community and operate under a state agreement, which is facilitated by the Department of Jobs, Tourism, Science and Innovation, with JITSI. To give you some perspective on how the site looked, so in the image to the left is January 2022. That was just prior to the commencement of demolition, and you can see sort of the northern, or shown to the left of the screen, the extent of the oil refining infrastructure. We were 150 barrels per day oil refinery, a significant operation. What is being proposed is 10,000 barrels per day, so a smaller operation, but of a similar in terms of the handling of feedstocks and conversion into products. At the moment, our site obviously doesn't look like this anymore, but all the infrastructure to the south of the site or the right of the screen, the tanks and the jetties and the pipelines remain in operation. There's a number that have been earmarked for repurpose. And you'll see the image to the right is the vision. So the terminal remaining in operation, the biorefinery, which is under consideration today, kind of in the middle of the site, and then to the extent to the north, there are some ambitions for renewable hydrogen production. In summarising what's been proposed by BP, I won't go through too much of the detail. It's quite extensively discussed in the application, but I just wanted to draw your attention to the image to the sort of south, or the bottom left corner. You'll see some established units before the proposed units to the sort of east of that area. We do have two formerly operated units that have been preserved. We do have the extent of tankage and utilities, and what is being proposed is the extent of those production units, all within that kind of area that's been earmarked and has been determined because of both operational and safety considerations, but also impact to surrounding neighbours and of course the community. I'd also like to just ask the panel to consider under condition 11, the inclusion of verbiage or as amended. Condition 11 speaks to a number of management plans that have been prepared and in discussions with the city. We'd like to include or as amended, just to represent that should those plans be revised, then the city would be capable of agreeing to any changes on what's being currently considered. Thank you for your time, and we look forward to the discussion today.
Well, thank you very much. Questions of the presenters?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chairman. The change to condition 11, that would also depend on the value of the works, I presume, because if it's considerable work, it'd probably be a mandatory application to adapt anyway. So you're aware of that?
That's right, and that's a conversation we've had with both our environmental regulator and the city, and of course with JITSI. So the background for the request is, for example, if we were to, this is a pioneering biorefinery. There isn't a lot of benchmarking that we're able to do globally, and certainly not in Australia. So we've prepared those plans based on a huge amount of third-party data. However, as we potentially the technology is more advanced, or if there are other facilities that we can consider our plans against that are required to do so, then we may seek to review those plans just to differ what our expectations are. And we don't anticipate that would be the case. I think we're very confident in what's been proposed and what's been assessed, but we just knowing that we've prepared documents on the basis of we are sort of developing and will be sort of building the first of our kind infrastructures, just so we can have that capability to engage back with the city and as necessary if we need to return to the DAP. But as I suggested, we don't expect there would be significant changes.
Thank you.
Right. Yes.
Yes, you've mentioned the BP Kwinana Energy Hub coastal management. and you've put 2025. Has there been any preliminary work done on that particular plan, or is it just something that you'll start next year, or is?
There has been, there's been some quite significant conversations with the state government, particularly pertaining to the Westport project. So Westport has been underway. They actually have done a lot of coastal adaptation considerations for our coastline as part of Westport. So our advice of particularly the Westport team is that they are completing a lot of data analysis. We will of course have access to that analysis, and we will be working with Westport to understand what their planning looks like, and both in the short term and in the long term as well. So we are obviously considering our assets. This proposal is some distance from the foreshore and is largely outside of mobility zones, but we will also be considering our entire asset and all of our other infrastructure as well, in accordance with some of those discussions, primarily with Westport.
Councillors, do you have any questions?
No.
None of them.
Thank you very much. Move to the officers.
Good morning, panel. I'm Brett.
Good morning, Brett.
Look, one, we did notice the yesterday that condition 2 is a condition, has a value in there of $500,000. That's incorrect. That should be $375,000 maximum contribution. As per our councillors aware of that. Okay. But other than that,
Right. Thanks. Other questions of the officers? Yes.
Just one. The recommendation and conditions should really include the approval under the MRS as well. Is that correct? I don't see that in there.
is there an advice note there?
Advice note. It should be. I need to include that in the preamble.
The questions, Lena.
In one of your pages, you mentioned about SPP 2.6 coastal planning policy. That you received a memo from BP, which is called Coastal Adaptation Memorandum. Are you happy? Is the city happy with that, or would they prefer a condition or advisory note put in? Just have a memorandum.
Yeah, that was discussed at length. I think for the reasons that are presented before me, stated we're comfortable with BP's position that they will be working towards preparing that plan or the adaptation strategy. Given that there's a lot going on in the area, so we didn't see the need to tie it to this application. Also for panel's information, we've received a grant from the state government to prepare our own adaptation plan, and we'll be working obviously closely with industry council and affected stakeholders to do that. So I think there's enough in works outside of this application that a condition or otherwise is not necessary.
Further questions? Councillors, do you have any questions of the officers?
None from me.
Okay, thank you.
None from me, but I will say I am having a little bit of difficulty hearing Brett. If you could speak a little closer to the microphone, maybe.
Cuddle up.
Thank you. Brett, in condition 6, you in response to an R13, you made some comments that landscape area, car park, and I can't find it straight away, but and something was the surrounds of the development site. So would the wording change for that, taking out the entire development area, would be landscape plan for the car park?
Yes, sorry, do you mind if I just grab the agenda?
All means.
Sorry, sorry, Mr. Chairman, it just says surrounding the main car park in front of the administration area.
Okay.
Car park and in front of the admin area.
This is condition 6 we're talking to.
Yes.
Yeah. So, do you mind repeating the question?
Well, I just wanted to clarify the wording in 6, in condition 6. I think my deputy presiding member has done that.
Do you want me to respond to that, Brett? Because I did complete the R13 request.
Absolutely, Asha.
Yeah.
Where are you?
See her on the video.
Yeah, that's correct. So currently the condition reads landscape plan for the entire development area. As I point out in our response, it's probably misleading, and that we would be accepting of a change of wording to focus on the main administration area and the car park around that's where the landscaping plan is, what the area covers.
All right, thank you for that. And Brett, are you happy with the suggested change to condition 11? So it might read something along the lines after the to the satisfaction of the City of Kwinana, or as amended, subject to the appropriate approvals being sought or given, or something like that.
I'll defer that to Asha. Have you got a comment on that?
Yeah, did discuss that with Taryn and happy with that approach.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions? No. Thanks, Brett. We'll move on to the item. We have a responsible authority report with a recommendation for approval with conditions. Is there a mover for the published report?
Yes, I'll move that.
Councillor Rose, thank you. And a seconder? Yes. June, thank you. Cortez. Councillor Rose, over to you.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Presiding Member. So I'm presuming that we're moving this with those amendments to condition 2B, condition 6 and condition 11, is that right?
Not at this stage. I think we'll come
Stage?
back. Yes, but we'll come back with some amendments.
Okay, that's fine. I think as a City of Kwinana council and panel member, I find this very straightforward. It's an appropriate location for such an industry. It's an excellent repurposing and integration of the existing utilities and the site. Very excited about this new technology and wholeheartedly support the application. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rose. Mr. Cortez, a seconder.
Yes, look, I think that the proposal is fit for purpose on the site and generally complies with all the planning requirements. The conditions that are recommended, whilst there are some amendments, are appropriate, and I think that it's good to see that DP are looking at repurposing quite a large area of the existing site, and I think that's commendable.
You want to through?
Well, I would move the amendments if I can, with proposing an amendment to condition
MRS.
yes, including the preamble, the general wording for approval under the Metropolitan Region Scheme. I think there's a standard wording for that.
Yes.
We can incorporate. I note that in the next item, it's actually included in the recommendations. So I think the wording will be, well, pursuant to clause 26 of the Metropolitan Region Scheme, this approval is deemed to be approval under clause 24(1) of the Metropolitan Region Scheme. So that's the first one.
Okay.
You want the second one?
Yes.
Amendment to condition 2B, where the financial contribution is mentioned to the City of Kwinana. I think it's $375,000, correct? Okay. Condition 6, the wording I'm proposing is the wording detailed landscaping plan for the area surrounding the main car park and in front of the administration building and following on from that. Which outlines the proposed species, etc. And condition 11, I didn't quite get that. So the wording for that is,
or as amended,
yes, so
subject to the appropriate approvals being obtained.
okay, moving that as well as on block.
I'll seek it. Excuse me, a seconder for those. Yes, Amendment Premji, thank you. Is there any discussion needed on any of those? No? Okay, I'll put those amendments. All in favour? That's
Penny.
Councillor Penny.
Against then?
Oh, sorry. Sorry.
All those in favour?
Yes.
Thank you. Unanimous. Thank you. All right, back to the substantive motion. Are there further speakers on the substantive motion for us? No. Councillor Penny? No. Okay. Look, I'm fully supportive of it. This is, I think it's terrific that we can see a different future developing for this site in Kwinana. So I'm more than happy to support it. So I go back to the mover, Councillor Rose, to close debate.
Thank you, presiding member. I don't think there's anything really needed more to be said. We're all excited about this new venture and yeah, fully supportive of it. And thanks for the panel support.
Thank you. I'll now put the motion as amended. All in favour? That's carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Moving on now to item 3.2. Walton Road, Casuarina, the extractive industry. Have a presentation from Daniel Lewis, and online is Sasha Martins. So 3 minutes each, I suppose. There.
Hopefully not combined.
Is Sasha going to do a presentation as well?
We'll briefly touch on grant process.
All right, that's fine.
I believe he's online. Thank you, presiding member. Thank you for the opportunity to speak this morning on item 3.2. That's the extractive industry proposal at Lot 5000 Orton Road, Casuarina. As you'll be aware, Element is engaged by Urban Resources to the future operator of the proposed extractive industry on this site. For the removal of doubt, we do not support the responsible authority report recommendation for refusal, but seek the Metro out of DAP, move an alternative motion for approval subject to conditions that we've provided. The conditions presented by the officers unfortunately provide are difficult for our client to work with, but I'll come back to that later in the presentation. The development proposal, as we've lodged, seeks approval for the extraction of 197,000 cubes of sand for use within the nearby residential industrial developments ahead of any subdivision and development on the site in accordance with the Casuarina Central Local Structure Plan. As you'd be aware, there is a critical shortage of sand within the South Metropolitan region, with existing estates requiring sand for continued development to meet current demand. Our extraction proposal aligns with the Casuarina Central Structure Plan's 50-metre CCW buffer to the west and south, excludes POS number 2 in the northeast corner, and has a 20-metre setback as per the extractive industry local law. I want to make the panel very aware of the fact that the majority of the site, namely 65% of the extractive industry boundary, is located underneath the 330 kVA power lines, with all existing native veg within the power line having been recently cleared, and current scattered veg is only regrowth, which is exempt from a clearing permit. Haulage is proposed via Orton Road to Thomas Road with the use of existing as-of-right vehicles as existing capacity within the road network. I want to be very clear on the depth of extraction. The proposal only seeks approval for a depth of 0.6 metres above the annual average maximum groundwater level, ensuring that there's no interception of groundwater by the proposal. And this is for the recreational the reserved land for rec. The residential section to the east is benchmarked at 3 metres above the groundwater level, and this is specifically designed to be 1.2 metres above the sewer invert level for the overall structure plan to not prejudice any future development. I want to make the panel also aware that clearing outside of the power line easement is subject to a native vegetation clearing permit, with our spring surveys have already been completed for this current spring. Regarding the acoustic assessment, there seems to be some misleading comments within the RAR, unfortunately. The panel should be aware that the current environment on this site is heavily influenced by the Kwinana Freeway, with background noise sitting at around a 57 to 58 decibel level, which exceeds the current operational noise regulations. All operations modelled on site can comply with a 45 decibel reading, which is the standard environmental regulation standards. However, that's masked by the background noise from the Kwinana Freeway being at 57 decibels. I'd like to allude to note also that the dust management plan in the RAR is supported by the city. Notably, that's the amended one that was submitted. The traffic impact statement also clearly demonstrates sufficient capacity within the road network, with allowing haulage to go north direct to Thomas Road to meet surrounding demand. Just briefly on the planning context in which we're in, the site is zoned development on the City of Kwinana's local planning scheme. As the panel will be aware, due regard is given to the Casuarina Central Local Structure Plan, as shown on the presentation slide. The timing of the subdivision for Casuarina Central at this time is not fully known, with Satellite and Department of Communities owning all the land to the east. However, our landowner and Urban Resources remain committed to developing the subject site for the intent of the structure plan following extraction, and will work in with Satellite and communities at the appropriate time. The current delay in the subdivision for this precinct is notably related to environmental clearing permits and EPBC and the time delays for that. I want to make the panel expressly aware that this proposal does not cede any recreational land or any obligation to the City of Kwinana following extraction. This is all to be dealt with as part of a subdivision proposal in the appropriate stage. Just on the landscape master plan, the future use of the recreational reserve is a critical element to determine the potential impact the proposal may have on future development. I want to make the panel aware that the Western Power easement is considered a deduction and is identified as a non-irrigated public open space with limited value to future residents. The easement, POS 4, you can see it on the slide, is a small sliver that separates the area of the easement through to the wetland buffer. This area will, following extraction, be at one level and at 0.6, allowing ease of movement and pedestrian connectivity when you develop the subdivision. Finally, the local water management strategy. I'm just going to briefly touch on this because Sash will touch on this aspect in detail. But like I said, depth of extraction is set at 0.6 metres above the annual average maximum groundwater level, and it will not prejudice pre and post development flows within the catchment. Catchment D, which you can see in the orange, makes allocation for stormwater detention within the Western Power easement, with detailed stormwater design reserved for an urban water management plan as is the appropriate process. Like I said, Sasha will have further commentary on the pre and post development flows to the wetland. And as the panel will be aware, stormwater will be retained on site following extraction, with infiltration into the subsoil exactly as it currently is. So finally, I'd just like to request that DAP support this development proposal for the extraction of sand ahead of the subdivision and development of this site. As the applicant, we've provided a list of conditions which would be acceptable from our perspective. However, we'd also be happy to walk through the panel with some of the key concerns we have with the alternative recommendation that's provided and particularly around conditions 8 to 16 and various management plans, and also condition 21 for traverse seeding of land. Thank you for your time. Thanks for allowing me to talk to this proposal. I'm happy to answer any questions the panel.
Thank you. Before we go to questions, we'll hear from Sasha and then we can combine the questions if necessary. So, Sasha.
Thank you. My apologies. My video doesn't seem to be working this morning. I'm not sure quite what's happened there, but it couldn't seem to connect. My name is Sasha Martins. I'm a principal hydrologist at Hyd 2O, who's a specialist hydrology consultancy in Subiaco. I've been engaged previously in various capacities, undertaking work at Lot 9000 Orton Road in Casuarina for urban resources, and also in developing the Casuarina Central Precinct Local Water Management Strategy for LWP, which we were the principal consultants for. On this basis, I wish to provide the following advice regarding the hydrological changes to the wetlands west of the proposed excavation area, which would result as a result of the proposed works. In relation to surface water, all surface water within the site is currently infiltrated on site without any runoff, and this will continue to occur to be the case following the sand extraction activities. Hence, there will be no change in surface runoff from the site to the wetlands as a result of the excavation. In relation to groundwater, levels vary seasonally and interannually based on rainfall. DWER's regional nearby long-term bore, T200, shows regional groundwater levels varying about 1 metre between winter and summer levels, and a further 1.5 metres interannually, depending on whether it's a wet or dry years. So regionally, sort of groundwater levels in the area can naturally vary in the order of sort of 2 metres in this vicinity. The wetland water levels are also controlled by existing stormwater outlets which connect to downstream drainage systems associated with the Water Corporation's main drainage for the Peel region. These outlets are contained at the northern and southern ends of the wetland and effectively sort of aim to control the peak groundwater levels that occur in that area. The proposed excavation will not expose any groundwater, so any changes in groundwater levels would only result as a change in evapotranspiration within the excavated area, and these would be minor in relation to natural seasonal and interannual variations. We therefore consider the impacts on the wetlands water levels as a result of the proposed excavations to be negligible, and the wetland water levels will continue to vary within the existing seasonal interannual variations which currently occur. Thank you.
Thanks, Sasha. I'll go to questions. Panel members, are there questions of the presenter?
Yes, I have a couple of questions. Where's the sand in that sort of southern corridor coming from now? You said it's there's a shortage of sand in that area. Where's it coming from? Primarily.
Yeah. Client sitting here, it's best place for Stephen Elliott.
Come forward, or can I?
You can come forward, yes.
Stephen Elliott, General Manager and owner of Urban Resources. We're a major sand supplier in the area for subdivisions, construction, fill sand. The material currently in the areas that we're looking at sourcing for Hope Valley through the Development WA precinct there, latitude 32. We have supplies of sand left in that area, and subsequent sand is now being sourced from the Baldivis area. Out of interest, the Stake Hill Road area, which is currently under an EOI for future housing. After that, it needs to come from as far south as Waroona and Lake Clifton. So any immediate, even if they're quite small resources that are available in this area, are going to service Byford and Mundijong subdivisions, which are two of the major southern regional growth areas, and they're all low-lying and in need of sand. So we actually have an immediate use for this material. I might add that the idea of doing this ahead of major structure plan and urban development is to have the time to extract it in a commercial, sensible manner, and not have a time pressure of the housing lot needing to be established at the same time. So to answer your question, it's in an area that's running out of sand, which is the Hope Valley area at the moment, and it's sourcing material for subdivisions that are nearby, so geographical distance of cartage is reduced, so it's commercially viable and it's also ownable in that respect.
Right, thank you for that. Further questions?
Yes, I presume Western Power have been contacted, or you've
Not
got
at this
some.
stage. Western Power, we work under Western Power easements in regularly. We've got 2 operations at the moment, and they won't consider anything unless we've got an approval to carry out the operation.
Okay, fine. Dust management plan. I've had experience with subdivisions in that location, and it'll be a question I ask of Kwinana as well, but there are moratoriums from some councils during the summer months.
There are.
October through to March.
Moratoriums exist. You can work through those periods if your dust management gets up to the next level of classification, and your open area is restricted to a certain size, which I believe is a hectare at a time. So we regularly work through the moratorium periods. They're not in place in town of Kwinana. They're in place in the city of Coburn next door.
Yes, that was the one I'm familiar with. And in doing your extraction, do you limit the face that you work on so that you don't sort of have 150 hectares or so exposed at a time? Do you sort of work a small area and then maybe mulch that to stabilise it and then move on so that you don't have all these areas exposed?
In this case, because this is nearly all future public open space, it is worked in relatively small areas, 1 to 2 hectares, and re-topsoiled as we go and grassed. My company owns its own hydromulsion glue-on application vehicle, so it's stabilised.
Yep, okay. And which way does the groundwater flow? Does it flow from east to west?
Ask Sasha.
Yeah, east to west.
Generally east to west, but also sort of probably it's got a bit of a southwest bent to it. So from sort of probably more northeast to southwest.
Yes. Okay. All right. At this stage, that's all the questions.
Councillor Rose.
Yeah, thank you. Just in regards to the Western Power, Western Power easements, you've said that you worked under those before. Will they be extracted to the same depth as the other areas of the site?
Yeah, so to answer that question, Councillor, that the whole recreational level will be benchmarked at 0.6 across the whole way across, so POS and the easement, except the tower. So on the sand excavation plan, which has the post-extraction contours, you'll see that just the towers have a battering around the towers, but everything else will be flat.
Okay, and what's the depth of the topsoil that you'll be taking out and then refilling?
The topsoil on site is typically anywhere between the 100 to 150 mil, depending on different areas and depending on the current vegetation that's on site. But effectively, that top strip gets moved, stockpiled, and respread. So whether it's 100 or 150, it just depends on what happens when machinery come on site and check it.
And so there'll be no further infill after the extraction except for the topsoil?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Further questions? Yes. Emma.
I've got a few questions. First of all, your Satterleys. Have you actually engaged with Satterley and showed the final, after all the 3 years of extraction, so forth, and rehab area, have you actually shown the Sattleys and Department of Communities what the final profile will be from that area if they wanted to develop?
So I guess the answer of that is in 2 parts. So there have been early conversations. The intent is to actually grab the whole site and merge it into the overall development. Urban Resources obviously do the civil and bulk earthworks for Satterley, and are constantly in dialogue with Brennan Acott at Satterley. This proposal was also referred to Satterley for their comment, and no comment was provided. No feedback on the application was provided during the process either. So,
my next one is to do with the hydrological modelling. Now, in the RA, it has been stated that no hydrological modelling to compare the pre-development and post-development of wetlands have been provided to the city. Given what Sasha has just said now, and I understand that, have you actually sat down with the city and actually showed what you have just explained to us? Have you actually sat down with the city and given them any model to show that, look, this is what is happening now. We've gone through the extraction period and look at it, it's still the same.
So we haven't specifically sat down with the city and given them a model that says the pre and post development flow is this, because it is the same. So our groundwater, all our groundwater modelling is showing what Sasha has presented.
Have you shown that to the city?
That was lodged as part of it.
The other one is your acoustics.
Yes.
Reading that, it has even been said in the report that you have not actually done the extractive and the rehabilitative activities occurring simultaneously. Why?
Yeah, so that's a misunderstanding from the officers. So what the acoustic report is modelling, it's modelling the highest machinery noise decibel, because rehabilitation in itself is just seeding. It's just seeding of pasture grass and a hydro mulch, which is effectively a water cart. So a water cart sound decibel is the same as a truck with a hydro mulch that's spreading hydro mulch. What's the misunderstanding is that we've done a worst case scenario for the modelling, and our monitoring and modelling shows it to be 45, to be compliant with the noise regulations at less than 45 decibels. The background noise levels from the freeway are sitting at 57 as constant throughout the day. So you will actually hear the freeway before you hear operations on site because of the masking level and the difference in your decibels.
And my other question is the road, looking at the turning off before you get to Thomas Road.
Bombay Road.
Bombay Road, thank you, should know that one. Bombay Road. It probably needs widening, and especially when you're turning on the left, you probably look at the turning circle and make sure that that is all pulled up, the road is extended. Are you willing to do that? Because you have to bring the road up to the standard to take those trucks.
The transport impact statement doesn't indicate that the road would need substantial widening, I'm pretty sure.
I don't have to pull the shoulders up, or even on the where you have to turn left.
Vehicles being used just as of right triaxle semi-tippers. We don't use any long vehicles, no truck and dogs. And those two corners you're referring to is the mushroom farm and other operations there that regularly have semi-trailers moving through them. And I'm not quite sure why it will be considered that it's fairly limited short-term truck movement. It's going to create any grave issues with those roads. We're quite happy to enter into road levy maintenance arrangements with the council. We do that on existing operations within the town of Kwinana, but the standard of vehicle movement here and the relatively small volume going to come out in the scheme of things would not indicate to me that there's an issue with that road network at all. We have far more higher volumes cross over far worse roads in the town of Kwinana than this particular instance. I was quite surprised it was even raised as an issue after the TIA was forward.
It was in the TIS that I saw said road contribution for upgrades as requested by Main Roads WA.
Road contributions, that's right. General damage to roads, yeah. It's not whether it's actual damage or not, it's an agreement to fund roadworks within the Shire, and we regularly do that at this stage.
So just for clarity, that's the expectation is that that'll be part of the licence application. There'll be a standard wording and agreement with the City of Kwinana for a road deterioration co-contribution. and that co-contribution is based on a volume and it's based on a distance of haulage that's taken. So that contribution gets given to the city, and then they use that for road maintenance. So for argument's sake, if there's any pothole or any deterioration of the haulage, that can be.
You made the comment that at the end of the extraction period, you will be looking at making sure that the future use of that particular area is not compromised. If it is required, that you may have to put some fill in to make sure that the development, we don't end up with a big deep hole that they've got to now fill it in before they put it in the residential. Will you be doing that?
Yeah, so just to be really clear, where the residential lots are going, there's a shallow strip that's coming off there. You'll see it in the post-extraction contours, but that's a shallow strip. And because we have the sewer invert levels, we know what our finished floor levels need to be for future houses. So there's no over extraction there. So there's no fill required. And then in the public open space areas that are being leveled at 0.6 above the groundwater level, we don't anticipate at this stage to have to import any material. However, as part of a landscaping strategy with the subdivision, if the experts come back to us and say, no, we need some more mulch, or we need for different species variety, we want some enhanced or enriched soils, that can be imported as part of a standard subdivision process.
That will be carried out by Saturdays?
So that none of that's been determined. It would be that's at the next stage, and that would be dealt with by the landowner as part of the subdivision, whether they put the property in as a JV but none of that's been determined at this stage.
So when you leave the area, you will do your contours and everything, rehab it, and leave that for the next landowner to determine it.
No, same landowner. Same landowner. It's just material comes out, we hydromulch it so that it's stabilised, no dust, seed it so that it can be managed, not causing any issues. And then as Satterley progress with their subdivision on the east, we'll work in with them because we're kind of in the southwest corner, and sewer's coming right from the top. So we're one of the last stages.
Thank you.
Thank you. Further questions?
I've got another one sort of follow up. Stephen, you're probably best to answer this. When your vehicles are on site, the scrapers or front end loaders or whatever, and trucks that come and go, what happens when you need to service those vehicles? Sometimes, hydraulic hoses and that can burst and you'll end up with diesel or whatever on the surface. What measures do you take to do that? Or are you going to have a servicing compound?
So we have a basic limestone compound for just where the site office would be, ablutions, which are just temporary ablutions, and we have only ever one or two front end loaders on site here, and they're stored there overnight. The actual fueling occurs at that compound area on the limestone area, and it's from a mobile fuel tanker, as you see floating around Perth. So there's no fuel stored on site. In the event of an oil spill, we have an oil spill strategy, which we have spill kits on site. In sandy areas, the only way to really fuel that is generally going to be a small hydraulic or diesel fuel spill, is to contain the area, excavate the material immediately, and we have front end loaders on site, so it's quite easy to do. Stored on a limestone and then removed off site to a facility. If it's major, if it's a minor event, same process. So we operate 8 or 9 sand operations around Perth and several of them in priority 1 water resource areas. This risk is extremely low.
And I presume that the extraction licence might cover some of those issues.
There's yes, extraction licence has typical conditions in it surrounding the management of that.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Staff on site.
The actual staff on site from our operation will be 3 to 4, and then whatever truck drivers go to pick up material. So at any given time, there's usually only 3 or 4 trucks there maximum, plus the 3 or 4 staff of mine.
So you're saying there will be ablutions on site?
Lunchroom and just to how you utilise the chemical toilets that you see.
Yeah, okay.
So just for clarity on that, in a period of peak haulage, how it works typically is urban resources will come in. There'll be a period of peak haulage to meet project demand. They'll bring in standard site toilet, distract in service in the week. If at the end of the month or month and a half, the pit stops, finish the contract, they're waiting for the next contract or next project, everything gets removed off site. So it's very intermittent.
Okay.
There's no building permit or any.
And the entry road, which is fairly lengthy, to the extraction area, will that be sealed?
So the actual bitumen roads that come right down to the front of the site are fully sealed. The strange right angled extension of Warden Road. From there we use limestone tracks. They're unsealed, but they're dust controlled. And whenever we're working on site, we have a water cart in the appropriate times of the year to keep the dust under control on those roads. So it's not, no, the answer is they're not going to be sealed. It's a short-term operation. You'd have to pull all that road back out because it's going to eventually be some form of public open space.
Okay. Yes.
I wanted to ask you, when you started your presentation, you've had a chance to look at the R13 direction.
Yes.
The comments that conditions 8 to 16 and condition 21. I didn't quite catch you as, did you want them deleted or amended or rejected?
Our preference is for them to be deleted.
Daniel, can you walk through them, please, then?
Sure. So the R13 request up to condition 7 is acceptable. Relatively reflects the recommendation that we had in the deputation submitted on Monday. Condition 8 relating to a water management plan pre and post. This is this groundwater monitoring and groundwater levels have all been already provided. Given there's no stormwater issues and there's a subsequent condition around maintaining stormwater on site, given those considerations, we don't believe condition 8 is required. Condition 9 refers to a rehabilitation plan and then details final groundwater levels, vegetation provisions, depth of topsoil, seeding plant species, maximum batter slopes, strategies to determine hydrological balance in relation to the CCW. All of this is already being provided within the environmental management plan, and we've been very clear from the start that our intent is to basically put this back to pasture so it's stabilised and leave all the detail around improving the POS to the subdivision stage. So we don't believe that this is relevant at this stage. Condition 10, this was a surprise to us, specifically given that this is a matter that's dealt with as part of the clearing permit and is not relevant from a planning consideration aspect, being the spring and flora and veg survey. I also made reference in my deputation to the existing easement having already been cleared recently. So that's not relevant. Condition 11, a landscape feature and tree retention plan. Again, this we don't believe is relevant to the actual proposal, being that we need to go for a clearing permit to clear some trees outside of the Western Power easement. That's dealt with separately. It seems odd that for a landscape feature plan and tree retention will ultimately give it ability to extract material, right? Because the trees sit above the sand. Condition 12, a wetland management plan. This management plan is best served at the subdivision stage because the wetland management plan will also determine what needs to be done within the wetland buffer and improvement within the wetland buffer. We're not touching the wetland buffer at all or any vegetation within, so we don't consider that relevant.
Yep.
Condition 13, a wildlife protection management plan. Given the entire easement's predominantly cleared of vegetation and we're going for a clearing permit which deals with the clearing of vegetation and having a fauna spotter on site, should we go down that route, that's not relevant to be part of a DA. That should be dealt with as part of the clearing permit application. Condition 14 refers to a transport impact statement. A SIDRA analysis, and I've provided advice to the city on this before, but a SIDRA analysis, the problem we have with a SIDRA, it only deals with a peak hour in the AM and a peak hour in the PM. We're running trucks on the hour every hour, so it won't actually pick up benefit, and there's enough capacity within the network. So that's why we've proceeded with only a TIS and demonstrating sufficient capacity in the network. So that request that condition be removed. Again, the environmental acoustic report. This unfortunately is a misunderstanding from in how the actual report works. And again, that needs to be removed. We note that DWER had no, there's commentary around vibration, but vibration only occurs from machinery that cause vibration, i.e. a roller or compaction operations. We're not doing that. We're just using a loader that's excavating from the face. So there's no relevance around vibration in that sense, and we're compliant with the noise reg. So my expectation would be that we'd have a standard advice note ensuring compliance with the noise regulations.
Well, the screening of sand doesn't cause.
Not screening the sand in this case, it won't be screened on site.
Yeah. And then the dust management plan, again, this condition, it seems odd that it's come in the R13, but in the RAR, the city have said that the measures in the DMP are acceptable, but now they're wanting amended measures in the dust management plan. Measures specifically around material to and from the site and ongoing monitoring, that's onerous for our client, specifically given industry standards is that all trucks have a cover on them anyway, and they don't leave the site without the cover over them from a dust perspective. Then 17 we can work with. It would be helpful for us to understand what type of fence the city of Kwinana are referring to, specifically given that following extraction, our expectation is when we develop POS, that might have to come out in order to have some sort of interrelationship between the POS and the CCW buffer. So ideally, that can just be some star pickets and some flagging to know that you're not going within this area. Pretty typical of how we demarcate the area that you're extracting anyway. 18's fine, 19 is okay, 19 is okay, 20, 21. The concern with 21, the first part of 21 is okay, being the landowner to submit an ASCON drawing and post-geotech report certifying that all extraction has been carried out in accordance with the approved plans. That's okay. And that the site is the appropriate physical condition for seeding in accordance with the Casuarina Essential Structure Plan to specifications of the City of Kwinana. Given we're not seeding anything, the concern is just around the terminology. If there's an associated advice note to just say that we're not improving it to this standard that will be required for a POS, but it's just confirming that the contours are as what we've proposed, then that would be okay. But my preference would be to remove the term seeding, because all of that detail and implementation of the public open space and maintenance for 2 years, all standard conditions as a subdivision will be dealt with later. And then 22 deals with the acoustic assessment, dust management plan, water management plan, rehab plan is fine, and ensures what is acceptable on site. That's fine. So that was kind of our reasoning behind those conditions.
All right. What your sites? What do you do about complaints? How do you manage complaints?
There's a range of things. We have a complaints register, obviously. There's not a lot of residents around this site, despite it going to be future urban development. It's a bit informal because what we try and do is encourage any local people who may have a complaint to contact us directly so we can take immediate action. One of the biggest problems with a formal complaint system, which is either through a council or a call to DWER, is the time taken for the complaint to get back to the proponent. And so in those cases, we deal with them if that's the way that it's gone. So we respond to them as soon as we can. The most common complaints that we ever have across a whole range of metropolitan areas are I would think relate to occasional poor truck driver behaviour out on the road, and potentially, if it's not under control, a dust complaint, particularly during those severe summer days that impact on the whole of Perth.
So how do they get to contact you? Is it through your website?
So anyone who's a local resident would has a letter from us before we commence works with our contact details. There's a signboard. They know it's Urban Resources. We have a website, have a number. Failing them wanting to deal with us directly, it would be through the council.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that. Any further questions? Councillors? No? All right. Thanks for that. Well, thanks, gentlemen. We'll move to the officers. Now we've got Brett back on board.
Sorry, Brett.
Any particular comments you want to make, or I suppose one of the questions would be comments on the conditions, whether or not you think that's a reasonable thing to delete those conditions that you've proposed, or have you looked at the conditions that they have proposed?
Sure, I'm happy to have that discussion, probably, in liaison with Asher, offline. Before we get to that, do you mind if I speak to our reasons for refusal?
Yeah, please.
Discussion, if possible. So I've just got a short statement that I'll just sort of run through. So the land is zoned urban under the MRS and has an approved structure plan in place. So land assembly is taking place within the LSP area, with notably the joint venture that's been mentioned already with Department of Communities and Satellite. So development will occur in the sort of foreseeable future, and obviously to facilitate that development, there will be some subdivision applications, etc. So although not bounded by the local structure plan, the decision maker is to pay due regard to the structure plan. The structure plan zones the land residential and reserves an area for public open space. Extractive industry is an X-use within a residential zone and a use inconsistent with the purpose of the POS reserve. If this zoning was on the scheme map, it would be a fairly clear outcome that the application would be reserved. However, as the zoning is designated in the structure plan, the city acknowledges that it's discretion to approve the proposed use, though this should be exercised with particular reference to the structure plan. The area of public open space impacted by the proposal is shown in the RAR on page 6, which is an extract from the landscape master plan, and is more clearly on the PDF on part B of the applicant's submission, page 133. The applicant showed that earlier on the screen. POS area 4 is described in the LSP as a neighbourhood park forming a connection with the conservation category wetland and CCW buffer, providing pedestrian connections from adjacent residential areas through the power easement, and will feature irrigated native planting and turfed areas. This is not an area of leftover space within a power easement. It's not an excess of public open space that's been commented before, but an unrestricted neighbourhood park intended as a mix of natural vegetation, usable turfed areas, and to serve a real purpose for Casuarina. The proposed extraction of the sand will leave this land in an unacceptable state to serve as a POS function as intended by the structure plan. The applicant's documentation emphasises the minimum distance maintained to the groundwater. However, it does not have that same sort of emphasis on the finished ground level differences for the POS. So once extracted, the POS will effectively be a basin or a pit, however you want to describe it, up to 4 metres deep in parts relative to the adjoining land, and surrounded by battering of a 1 to 3 gradient. The POS will be up to 4 metres lower than the adjacent wetland buffer on the western and southern sides, and up to 3 metres lower than the future residential land on the structure plan side, on the eastern side. This area or this pit will sever any realistic connection to the wetland envisaged by the structure plan. The pit will be visually dominated by steeply battered walls and battering around the bases of the high voltage power lines, which is a very poor visual outlook and certainly not a space for active use. The gradient of the battering is far from compliant with standard planting gradient. That's 1 and 4 and should be 1 and 4, and as well as for accessibility needs 1 and 6, which I'm sure you're aware of. So given the low level compared to the surrounds, it's highly likely that this area potentially would actually end up serving as a sort of catchment for water, and our engineer has some views on that, which we can explore a bit further. So it's not acceptable to the city that the proposal will leave the land in a state which is entirely inconsistent with the local structure plan. It's very difficult to conceive at this point on the information that we've got that the pit could be or will be remodelled during future subdivision works as contended by the applicant. So there are our sort of comments on point 1, the refusal. I've got a shorter few comments on point 2. So the second recommended reason for refusal relates to the real potential for considerable irreversible damage to the adjacent conservation category wetland. Although the application provides some environmental and hydrological reporting, this information was insufficient for both the Department of Biodiversity, Conservation and Attractions and the Department of Water and Environmental Regulation to definitively state that the proposal will not negatively impact on the wetland and groundwater. That's a position shared by the city's engineers and environmental planner. Even for myself, it's obviously not an engineer or environmental scientist. It's hard to comprehend that 4 meters of excavation immediately adjacent to a buffer area, which is the buffer area is intended to protect the wetland, would not have some sort of effect on the functioning and hydrology of that wetland. So in the absence of clear, accepted and definitive environmental and hydrological advice and modelling, the city is strongly of the view that a precautionary approach should be taken in considering this application. So as you're aware, we've got representatives from the city online, and I'm happy to take any questions on that.
Okay, thank you. Questions?
Yes, it seems like more appropriate buffers would be one thing that would address it. The other is perhaps some more definitive from where is it that you are seeking to say, well, look, it will have no effect on the buffers. The way it looks when it's finished with appropriate buffer batters, would that be acceptable to council?
Potentially, further advice and liaison with DWER to address those concerns would go some way. We're still not convinced that that sort of extent of excavation is going to be conducive or help the POS development in the future. This is an isolated lot. The applicant has said they've had discussions with Sadly, but there's no sort of agreement or timing or any sort of certainty around what is going to happen, whether this area is going to be refilled, who's going to do the modelling, whether this lot will actually form part of the subdivision application for works in there. So we feel like there's too much uncertainty. I think what we'll be left with once the sand is extracted is a pit. It's a low sort of area that we just don't know who will pick that up. Not confident that we'll have any sort of statutory mechanism through the subdivision process to have that area upgraded to a standard that was envisaged by the local structure plan in the first place.
Questions?
Conditions that we asked in the R13 that you have put forward, if the panel were to go that way, is the city happy with those conditions and that would address their concerns and provide that certainty?
I refer to Asha. Make a comment on that.
Yeah, so we've put together those conditions because of in the event that it is approved, but it wouldn't be, there's still a lot of assessment to be done through those. As you can see through the management plans we've requested, and a lot of information. So that's the kind of information that we would preferably have upfront before we actually made a decision on the application. So I think it's reasonable to say that our recommendation is still to refuse, and that those conditions are just what we have identified as something we would hope would alleviate some of the issues or give us some more information, but we can't really be sure. We've just put them as further sort of details that we would hope we could work through with the applicant to get a better outcome than what we're currently seeing as the proposal.
I know in the RA you actually stated that you were not given any hydrological modelling. Have you received any hydrological data from the applicant?
I can defer to Christine on that, our environmental planner.
Yeah, hi, Christine Burtonshaw, environmental planner for the city. We did request the hydrological modelling. So our general approach for that is we will request where there's a sensitive receiving body, which is a CCW. We also suspect we're aware that in our assessment that particular wetland stays wet all year round, which indicates that there's a natural spring occurring on that wetland, on or around that wetland, which we are aware there is, which alludes to the critically endangered tumulus mound spring touristic community type in that area. I note that the EAR, the environmental assessment report for the structure plan, hadn't identified that particular outcome or that particular spring at that wetland. I've since undertaken the assessment. I've since been talking with Department of Biodiversity, Conservation and Attractions, who are the subject matter experts in this area, and they concurred with my suspicions that we may have a tumulus mound spring on this site. We've also got one in Honeywood and Wallard. There are about 5 existing tumulus mound springs that we're aware of on the Swan Coastal Plain. So a very important consideration in getting our hydrological balances, and especially in the context that it hasn't been recognised in any of the previous hydrological work that's been done. So our concern is, well, so on that, our normal process is that we will receive the data and the modelling, the actual modelling sets from the hydrologist, and we will refer them to hydrological experts within Department of Water, Environment and Regulation, and they will assess that modelling to ensure that, you know, it's been correctly done. So we haven't received any of the modelling or any of the data sets, and to refer to DWER, because we don't have our in-house hydrologists. So we always refer to the subject matter experts at Department of Water and Environment and Regulation. So that 2 things there, I suppose. The non-identification of the spring on site, no conversation with within any of the environmental reports of suspected tumulus mound spring, which we know are in the area, and also the lack of data and modelling for DWER to be able to assess comprehensively. Does that answer the question?
As my next question, I don't know if you've got any engineers on board here, but
yes.
I just want to ask about the final slopes of the excavated site. Hello. The final slopes of the excavated site, as now have you had of course you would have reviewed it. How do you see that sitting with the proposed structure plan, the proposed development and structure plan?
Sorry, just to explain quickly, just to the reference what they made from the applicant AMGL, which is the annual average throughout the many years and take the maximum of the groundwater level, plus the MGL, which is also need to be looking to it. I'm just coming back to the matters because that's also play into key on this matter. So the AMGL, what they proposed on their proposal is about 500 to 600 difference to the finish level. However, when you look at the MGL, they only had 100 mil to 150 clearance. As per the Department of Water, which is currently DWER, recommended 300 separation to the finish level. So the batters what they proposed, which is 1 in 3 without encroaching into the buffer area, which is which is we clearly said that in our discussion, it has to be a future unrestricted land use area. We have to be 1 in 4, 1 in 6. That means the barriers need to be lifted up. So pretty much you can't enter into ecological purpose into the buffer, then you have to push in and the lift aside. So the buffers, the barriers where they propose, which from our engineering point of view, even though it's self-stabilized for a sand, but it will have eventually will cause erosion and other issues. Same as Brett said, these proposed levels, what we believe it's going to create another artificial kind of basin. So the barriers need to be lifted within their land without encroaching into the buffer.
Thank you.
Further questions? No. Councillors? Okay, thank you. Thanks for that, Brett. Move on to the item, the responsible authority report with a recommendation for refusal and reasons. Is there a mover for the published recommendation?
Yes, I'll move it.
Councillor Rose, is there a second? Yes, thank you, Councillor Penny. Councillor Rose.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Presiding Member. The City of Kwinana officers have outlined extensively why the proposal should be refused. We should not be swayed by the City's alternative motion and conditions for approval, as these were only being submitted to guide the panel if refusal is dismissed. So they're not the preferred option. And I am in agreement with the City and I support the recommendation to refuse. We've heard about having due regard to the LSP, although we're not bound, we should have due regard to the local structure plan. And as this is a endorsed document from the WA government, it will be a much needed neighbourhood park, and the connection for pedestrians from the residential area to the adjacent wetlands will be invaluable as a recreational area. The proposed extraction of sand up to 4 metres or even more lower than the proposed residential area, which will then only be backfilled by 150 mils of stockpiled topsoil, will result in extensive change to the topography of the area, with possible excessive undulations and sloping that will basically render the area unusable and unfit for a neighbourhood park. The Western Power towers could end up being several metres higher than the surrounding land, creating an eyesore, and the incline of the proposed batters would make connectivity from the resident areas to the wetlands and buffer non-existent, as well as providing before subdivision pooling of water and those problems that the City officers have outlined. The local planning scheme states the person shall not on any local reserve excavate, spoil, or waste the land that so as to destroy, damage, or adversely affect its usefulness, which it is reserved. So the proponent may be expecting the POS to be refilled and the topography returned to the current levels by the developer and at subdivision stage. However, the developer could not be reasonably expected to return the land to the current levels to achieve the usable POS that would be consistent with the local structure plan. The developer, as we know, usually does public open spaces to minimum standards, and sadly have not even commented on whether this will be the case, and nothing has been determined for the future. The water management plan was developed for the LSP, and not for this proposal, so it cannot be used to determine the impacts of deep extraction on sand on the wetlands and the water table. The proponent has only provided surface level reports with little detail and no investment to support their assertion there will be no negative effects on the wetlands. Touching on other, as a local government councillor for the area, truck movements along Orton Road and Bombay Boulevard will have significant impacts on local residents. While the road infrastructure may be able to accommodate the vehicle movements, albeit with added financial contributions for the upkeep of these roads, the vision, noise, vibration and congestion of up to 200 additional trucks on the roads on a daily basis will have significant impacts on the amenity and well-being of the residents along the route. Trucks along Orton Road are at the moment 10% of vehicle movements, which equates to about 25 truck movements per day, and this will rise to 225, which is 50% of truck movements along that 6-metre wide road. Dust will also be a significant issue, as we know, for local residents who rely on water runoff from roofing, which will become contaminated if dust levels are not effectively controlled. I know the proponent will develop what will appear to be a sound dust mitigation report and strategy, and will intend to do all possible to prevent impacts on dust and surrounding housing, but any proposed measures cannot guarantee surrounding properties won't be negatively impacted. So yes, that's my reasoning for supporting refusal of the application. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rose. Councillor Penny, a seconder.
Thank you. I really want to reiterate the points that Councillor Rose made, and you know, of a primary concern is that the statutory mechanisms to return that area to an acceptable public open space doesn't exist. We're concerned that the irreversible changes that will be occurred through the extraction of the sand will not provide a satisfactory outcome. And again, I want to reiterate that those surface level environmental reports are not satisfactory to the city.
Thank you. Further speakers?
Look, I have a contrary view. I think that the use of sand resources are diminishing, or the source of sand is diminishing, and I think the proposal that's been put forward has merit. Firstly, the neighbourhood is going to be changing quite a lot. I think that in future we'll have a lot of traffic in there with the subdivisional development work that's going to be proposed. The traffic in the area is going to increase when they start doing the urban development. And I think that the comments like ponding of water, I can't see how lowering the level is going to pond if there's no additional water going in there. The only water that's going to go in there is the rainfall. So I can't see where that came from. I think in the interest of sustainability too, I think that if we're going to be hauling sand in long distances, we're going to have, you know, additional fossil fuels being used in the trucks and so forth. I think that the measures that the proponents have put forward in regard to the environmental management plan during the construction, during extraction, with and the experience they've had in removing or, you know, undertaking other areas within the city. The truck numbers, yes, there's going to be an increase in truck numbers, but that's going to happen in any event when development occurs. So I would be speaking against the motion to refuse. I would be proposing an alternative motion to defer it, to defer the application at this stage, so that the proponents who have done a lot of work, and perhaps there may be some shortage or some information that they need to supplement, give them the opportunity to do that over a period of time, just rather than refusing it. And whilst I sympathise with the local residents that will be impacted, sooner or later they're going to be impacted far more than this, at benefit to them as well. So I would be moving an alternative motion to defer it to allow further information to be provided, so the applicants can address it over a period of time rather than refusing. Refusing it opens it up to an appeal, which goes to SAT, whereas this point in time, a deferral for a period of time gives us the opportunity to allow them to address the concerns that the council has. In regard to the open space and the levels, I don't think there's any plans as to how that open space is going to be developed. I don't think the council has got any plans for active or passive use. There are areas underneath easements that are used for playing fields and so forth these days. So there's a range of uses that can be provided with the levels that the developers or the extractive industry and landowners are providing. So I'd be moving a deferral on this one.
Okay, Mr. Cordes, then if it's a deferral, that's a procedural motion.
Yep.
So we just need to get the wording for the deferral then for a period of up to...
I would say up to 90 days.
Okay, up to 90 days. Yep. For the purpose of?
To allow the proponents to further review the future use of the area under the easement in conjunction with council and other developers nearby that may be part of future development.
And to provide additional information in relation to
groundwater modelling.
Yes,
the second reason for refusal, yes.
Got deferral motion put by Mr. Coltaz to defer it for up to 90 days. Review
the future use of the public open space
in consultation with the city officers,
city
of Kwinana.
City of Kwinana and joining developers,
and secondly to provide further information in relation to the reasons for refusal.
Yes.
Okay, I'll need a seconder for that. Okay, Nima, thank you. So that's a procedural motion, so there's no further debate on that. I'm going to put that motion. All in favour? Against? That's carried. Thank you. All right, so we'll move on to wind up the meeting. No Form 2 applications, no 31s. Some SAP matters listed there. General business. No, and I'll close the meeting officially at 10:57. Thank you everyone for your attendance.
Thank you.
Thank you.